Nancy Pelosi had not yet begun her career in politics when the Supreme Court enshrined the constitutional right to an abortion in Roe v. Wade. Nearly 50 years later, she was the first female Speaker of the House when the court overturned Roe, throwing out a half-century of progress. Under her leadership, the House immediately passed legislation to restore abortion rights nationwide. Those efforts went nowhere in the Republican-led Senate. Now, as Speaker Emerita, Nancy Pelosi continues to fight against the Republican project to eliminate reproductive rights in America, and she joins me now. It's great to have you, Congresswoman.
Thank you, Chris. Lovely to be with you as we talk about matters that relate to America's families.
Yeah, I want to ask just about this bill, because it was so wild to me to watch them all rush out with these statements, which I understood, because obviously it's a political crisis. I think probably 90% of Americans found the Alabama ruling awful. And then to just Google the fact that they've got a majority or co-sponsors on this bill that just plainly does what Alabama does, what the Alabama ruling does. Do you think they know that they're on that bill? Are they pretending to not know? What's going on?
Well, let's see what the title is. Life at Conception Act. So they have to know what that means. I've said for years that I think the people on the other side of the aisle need a lesson in the birds and the bees, because sometimes they don't seem to understand. But the fact is that 125, a majority of the House GOP, are co-sponsors of this legislation. That doesn't mean there aren't more who would be supporting it. But it comes at an interesting time. And instead, we have in the House a place for them all to go if they disagree with the Alabama decision. Congresswoman Susan Wild of Pennsylvania has early on introduced a bill with Senator Duckworth in the Senate, a corresponding bill called the Access to Family Building Act. And this would enable families to have a statutory right to have access to the technology and the rest for in vitro fertilization. It would also empower the Justice Department to act upon those who would deprive women of those rights and give women a right of private action if someone tried to deprive them of that. It does more, but that's the essence of the bill. They could easily sign on to this bill to contain their enthusiasm for in vitro fertilization. Instead, they have Life at Contraception Act, which is a contradiction.
Well, what's striking here, too, is that I actually think, when you look at Alabama, right, they moved very quickly because they understood the politics of it, that it was completely upside down. It strikes me as, honestly, just as a pure political play, that a Mike Johnson-led House teaming up with a Schumer-led Senate to pass legislation that federally protected IVF would probably be a political benefit to Republicans. But my sense is that there's enough of the caucus that actually doesn't think it's okay that they're not going to move to a vote on that.
Well, let's hope that that's not the case. As you've heard me say again and again, President Lincoln said public sentiment is everything. There's nothing more eloquent to a member of Congress than the voice of his or her own constituents. Lincoln didn't say that. I'm saying that.
Right.
And so we want people to weigh in with their members of Congress. I've heard from people of faith, devout Catholics, even nuns, saying this is a gift of God to enable families to have babies. And they've spent their life saying that that's what they want, and now when they have that opportunity, they have the Life at Conception Act.
Let me ask
you. Not contraception, mind you. Only
yes,
eight of them in the House, 8 Republicans in the House voted for women to have a right to contraception. That meant 195 of them voted to say women shouldn't have a right to contraception.
There's a lot going on in Congress this week. Mike Johnson is very clearly, I think everyone would agree, in over his head. I don't even think that's a controversial assessment. Meanwhile, Mitch McConnell has announced that he'll be stepping down as Senate Majority Leader. And I thought of you when I saw that announcement, because your careers have been both parallel and at times intertwined. And I thought, I wonder what Nancy Pelosi thinks about Mitch McConnell's announcement.
Well, I've worked with Mitch for years. We had a similar position in the 90s, as we had a corresponding role as the top Democrat and top Republican House and Senate on the foreign operations of appropriations. So I've known and worked with him for a long time. I've disagreed with him a lot. In fact, he's wrecked us with the court in terms of a woman's right to choose and so much else that this Roe court is going down a path of. But we've worked on other issues together. It's interesting to me, though, if I just may say, I, for 20 years, was in leadership either the leader of the House or the Speaker of the House, passed landmark legislation, affordable health care, the list goes on and on. Rescue package, infrastructure bill, a PACT Act for our veterans, IRA to save our planet and to reduce the cost of prescription drugs, CHIPS bill, just to name some things that are new. When I stepped aside, they said she stepped aside, but she's still here. When he stepped aside, end of an era. It's a guy thing, I know. But I have to just say, for women, we want our proper attention, too. So in any event, I wish him well in his decision. I worry about his health. I'm sad for his family's loss recently, Elaine losing her sister. And we'll just see how it goes. But a very strategic player in the Congress. Well